Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from Corey Donaldson. What is your opinion on those who thumb their nose at blue-collar workers like they're nothing? I think blue-collar workers are one of the most important segments of our society and one of the most vital segments of our economy. And, you know, I've said this before, my grandfather, who started working professionally back in the 1950s, worked on the railroad for 30 years and was able, through his blue-collar workers' salary and benefits, to not only raise a family, but to put me and my brother debt-free through college, and to have a comfortable retirement until his death, where he and my grandmother could take vacations, could have money to pay their medical expenses, never seriously had to worry about where the money was going to come from. That was off of his one job, his blue-collar union job that was very well paying and had great benefits and a good retirement plan. And that sort of thing is increasingly rare in the United States today. And that didn't happen by itself. That happened because that way of life was systematically dismantled and destroyed by people who were willing to increase their own wealth and the wealth of their donors and their peers and their support base, their wealthy support base, on the backs of blue-collar workers. It's destructive and shameful. So my opinion of such people couldn't hardly be any lower. Ahoy Yerno, when did you last have an epiphany that changed the way you view things? For me, it happened when Kevin Logan, hi Kev, said that most people don't know their sex chromosomes. For some reason, that thought has been bouncing in my head ever since. I have no clue whether I actually have XY chromosomes. Mine is actually similar to yours. I was doing research for a video that I released a few weeks ago about scientific racism. And while in the course of that research, writing that video, it hit me with a clarity that I hadn't had before, that genetic variation is greater within racial groups than it is between racial groups. And it's a problematic way to phrase that, because scientifically speaking, racial groups don't really mean anything, but that's kind of the point of saying it that way as well, because the superficial differences that we look at when we try to place someone in a racial category, like skin color or shape of your face or shape of your eyes or your nose or the type of hair you have or things like that, those are not the result of great genetic differences. It doesn't take very many genes, it turns out, to determine your skin color or the shape of your nose or your hair color or whatever. So there's actually a lot more genetic variation within racial groups than there are between racial groups. And not just racial groups, within populations in general. Genetic diversity is much larger within a population than it is between populations. The whole premise of race realism, of, well, white people are just better at these things than black people, or black people are just genetically, the whole basis for that is ridiculous. So that was probably the last big epiphany that I had, that really, it didn't change my opinion, because I've always thought that race realism and scientific racism is horseshit. But it gave me a clearer way of looking at it, and a much more immediate sort of clear-headed, sharp, focused understanding of why those ideas are fundamentally flawed. W. Mark Walker, Steve, are you aware of the slur Chris Dodds posted on the Columbus Pride Festival 2017 Facebook page? His post on their page was, I hope this event turns out like the Boston Marathon a few years back. All fags should be killed or at least relocated. A lot of people, plus 56,000 on a petition, want him fired from his job as a mechanic from the Columbus, Ohio school system, as well as the school board themselves. Now the ACLU is defending him, saying that what he said is truly vile, but to fire him from his job would be unconstitutional. What do you think? Unfortunately, because he is a government employee, firing him for something he said has been interpreted by the courts as being a suppression of free speech, and therefore the government is not allowed, a government agency is not allowed to fire an employee as a result of something they said. Now, I think that it is possible to protect free speech without telling government agencies that they can't fire racists who post racist shit. I would be perfectly content if the First Amendment were interpreted in such a way to say that you can't put someone in prison for something they say, you can't arrest someone, take away someone's liberty for something that they say, but if someone says something inappropriate or that is that puts the organization that they're working for in a bad light or is harmful and derogatory to marginalized groups of people, then it's perfectly fine to kick them the fuck out. I think that would be a perfectly fine way to interpret free speech, to say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, absolutely, you can be fired for being a fucking public racist. Yes, that's not a violation of free speech. But unfortunately, the courts have tended to disagree with me, and they view losing your job as a result of your speech as a form of punishment if you work for a government agency, and the First Amendment protects speech, which is interpreted as meaning you cannot be punished by the government for something that you say. Scott Bressinger, in recent months, I've greatly enjoyed The Way of the Heathen by Greta Christina, and was greatly disappointed by Dan Barker's God, the Most Unpleasant Character in All Fiction. The former is kind-hearted and funny, while the latter is largely just made up of Bible quotes. Which leads me to wonder, of all the atheist free thought books you've read, what would you consider the best, and yes, worst, and why? Have you been forced to reconsider the early works of Sam Harris in light of his slide into intellectual laziness and pseudoscience? This may come as a surprise to some people, but I haven't read a great deal of the atheist literature that has been published in the last few years. I read God's Not Great when it came out, and thought that was very good. I read The God Delusion. Actually, I just recently, just in the last couple of years, read The God Delusion. I didn't read it when it came out. I have not read Sam Harris's The End of Faith, which was his sort of big debut as a new atheist, but I did read his subsequent book, Letter to a Christian Nation. And as you speculate in your question, my views on Harris have darkened considerably since then. I no longer have any use for Sam Harris at all. But yeah, as far as favorite books, I haven't read Greta's book. I keep meaning to, because I love Greta Christina. I'm a huge fan of hers. I read Aaron's book, his creationism book that he released just a few months ago, the Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism, and I thought that was terrific because I'm a huge fan of Aaron and Lalandra, and he's one of my favorite people, and I thought his book was excellent. And I read Seth Andrews' book, Deconverted. Actually, I listened to the audio book, which is the best way to listen to read Seth's book, and I thought that was terrific. So I guess those would have to be some of my favorites. Malevolent Divinity. Do you think the way society functions mirrors that of how schools do? Or perhaps the other way around? When I think on it, I notice the way a classroom is set up, with a large force attending to the will of an individual who has more or less supreme authority and are rewarded with numbers that have no intrinsic value except what society gives them, grades versus money, is somewhat similar to that of how businesses seem to work. Do you think we could improve society by improving how schools function, not educationally, but instead procedurally? Wow, Ahoyerno, I think I just had my latest epiphany. Thanks to Malevolent Divinity's question here. That is a fantastic way to look at it. I never realized before, but you just described it, that education is driven by a form of the profit motive. That instead of wanting to earn the most money, you want to get the highest grades. And it becomes about getting the highest grades, not about learning the material, not about reaching an understanding, not about bettering yourself or even learning a skill or coming to know the world. And none of that, that's all secondary to getting the best grade. That's fantastic. I hadn't even considered that before I read your question. I think that is a really, really, really insightful way to look at it. And when you look at it that way, yeah, I think we could greatly improve not only our educational system, but our society by finding a different way to do things. By finding a way to teach students that instead of incentivizing getting the high grade, incentivizing understanding the material, incentivizing growing and learning and increasing your knowledge and understanding. I don't know how you would do that. It would be a radical shift in the way we go about education in this country, but If anybody could figure out how to do it, or if somebody already has figured out how to do it, I would be in support of that 100%. And I think it would be a great way to improve society. Jon Brockman. So ContraPoints and H-Bomber Guy were part of a big lunch group that included 2 YouTube anti-feminists. Are they off the bowling team? No, they're 2 of our best bowlers. I'm not going to kick 2 of our best bowlers off the team. I hated that picture. I hated that picture. And I hated what it represents. I hate this idea that we should all get along, that people who make it their profession to harass and bully people and promote ignorance and intolerance should be treated like friends when we meet them in person, and we should all just get along and pretend as though we're all starting at 0 when we meet each other in person. I think that's horseshit. And no, I would not have sat at a table with those 2 people. But I also acknowledge that my way is not the way of everybody, and I am not going to say, well, H-Bomber Guy sat down at a table with these fucking shitty people, therefore he's not my friend anymore. ContraPoint sat down at a table with these shitty people, therefore he's not my friend anymore. The fact that they were willing to keep company with 2 people who I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire means that I don't understand that. I wouldn't have done that myself. I think that kind of thing is ultimately counterproductive. But it doesn't mean that I think that Contra and H-Bomber Guy are bad people. And I don't hold it against them, and I don't think that they should be ashamed of themselves or whatever. It's not something I would have done, and it's something that I wish people wouldn't do. But I don't make such demands of people that you can't take a picture with somebody. There was someone who came up to me at the most recent Reason rally, and I didn't recognize who it was. If I had recognized who it was, I wouldn't have consented to have my picture taken with him, but I didn't know who it was. And we took a picture. I smiled and I complimented him on his shirt, and we had a nice little moment and we took a picture. And then later I realized, oh shit, that's who that was. Damn, I wish I could take that picture back, but I can't. So no, I don't hold it against them. And as far as I'm concerned, they're on the bowling team as long as they feel like bowling with us. Joe McLaury. I was having a conversation about the DCEU with a friend of mine, and it got me thinking that I do not hate the idea of a Superman movie that subverts the character of Superman. Hell, there are interesting comic stories where Superman just wants to be normal, and others where his power does corrupt him, and he acts as a demigod of justice as defined by his own will. How would you feel about a well-executed Superman movie that subverts his character? I think the key words there are well executed. If somebody made a good movie, if somebody had a really good idea and told a well-executed story that subverted the standard Superman character, that showed him in a more negative light, or showed what would happen if his power went to his head, if he viewed his abilities not as an opportunity to help people, but as an opportunity to impose his own kind of order and dominate people, I think that could be a really interesting story. It's, as Roger Ebert used to say, and as I have quoted many, many times in various videos of mine, it's not what a story is about that matters. It's how it is about it. Is it possible to tell a great Superman story that views the character in a much darker, more morally ambiguous way? Yes, of course. Of course. Has that happened even remotely in the DCEU to this point? No, of course not. It hasn't happened at all. Those movies have not been sophisticated about the character of Superman in the slightest degree. They've shown us just a very superficially morose, mopey, dour character who other characters in the movie unaccountably still view as like a heroic, inspiring character. So no, it hasn't happened at all. I don't think the DCEU is seriously interested in doing that with Superman. But could it be done? Yeah, absolutely. And would I approve of it, or would I be capable of enjoying it if it was a well-done story? Yeah, of course. I would welcome any great Superman story at this point. JD. So I admit I'm not that up on the whole Gamergate thing. From what I understand, Anita made an initial blog about the representation of females in video games, and she got a virtual lynching off the basement-dwelling virgin club. Is this true? And it basically spiraled out of control from there. Then, after years of harassment, she used a public forum to call one of them a garbage human, and suddenly these people who spent years harassing her are having a cry about it? Personally, I say fuck them, they're arseholes and they deserve it, but if it brings the harassment by these people into mainstream media, then that's even better. Hopefully they'll realize that real popular opinion outside of their little safe space is actually against them. What do you think? You've basically got it. The harassment of Anita Sarkeesian was not what started Gamergate, that was the harassment of another woman. But yeah, in terms of how the anti-Anita stuff started, you've basically got it. She critiqued video games from a feminist perspective and was just absolutely mobbed and declared the worst person in the world and lied about and misrepresented and harassed and threatened and basically just treated like shit for daring to have an opinion about video games that this group of mostly young men disagreed with. And yeah, what happened at VidCon was one of the ringleaders of harassment of her and harassment of many other people showed up in person to intimidate her by making sure that he sat in the front row of one of her panels along with a bunch of his like-minded friends. It was purely an act of stalking and harassment and personal intimidation, and she called him out and called him a garbage human. And the response was immediately to cry victim and to talk about how he had been harassed and how he was owed some kind of justice. It's completely disingenuous. It's a gaslighting tactic. It's how abusers act. They act like they're the ones that have been harmed when they have just perpetrated an act of harm against someone, and then finally they're stood up to, and they pretend like they're the ones that have been wrong. That's a classic abusive tactic. Will the greater mainstream attention be good in the long run? I don't know. I hope so. What I hope not only will people in that hater Gamergate anti-feminism group realize that popular opinion is against them. What I really hope is that YouTube and Twitter and Patreon and all of these other platforms that these people exploit and depend upon in order to make a living being professional harassers, predominantly of women on the internet, realize that this kind of behavior should not be tolerated, and finally just do what they should have done in the first place and kick them the fuck off and say, you're not going to be on YouTube anymore, you're not going to be on Patreon anymore, you're not going to be on Twitter anymore, you're not going to use our platforms as a means to make it your job to harass and abuse people. That's what I would like to see happen in the aftermath of this. But am I holding my breath for that to happen? No. But, you know, I might be able to hold my breath all the way through this next segment because, in theory at least, it's supposed to go pretty fast. It's a little something I like to call the lightning round. Damn, and if you squint just right at the ending of that last segment, it's almost like it was a segue. Not quite, but almost. Anyway, Me the Me's. For years now, I've been an atheist, but I still enjoy a lot of music the religious have made. In particular, Schubert's Ave Maria is a beautiful, haunting piece. Is there music made specifically for the religious that you really enjoy? Oh, yes, absolutely. I enjoy a great deal of sacred music. A lot of Bach's music was liturgical, was church music, and he composed some of the most beautiful classical music that you'll ever hear. Amazing Grace is a beautiful piece. And there are arrangements of Amazing Grace that I've heard that move me nearly to tears. Yeah, absolutely. Me not believing in God does not stop me from appreciating music that was written with the intention of serving a religious purpose. Not at all, not at all. Lucas Hackett, yo Steve, what sounds worse? Drunk Batman, drunk Superman, or both? Take your pick. I mean, I get the feeling drunk Superman could cause a lot more damage. Remember when Superman got, not necessarily drunk, but he was chemically altered, let's just say, in Superman 3, and boy, he did a lot he straightened the Leaning Tower of Pisa, he blew out the Olympic torch, he flicked those peanuts into that guy's mirror at the bar and then melted it. I mean, yeah, drunk Superman seems like bad news. Joshua Purvis, hi Steve, hope you're doing well. I enjoy your videos and your podcast. Awesome. I have the Blu-ray of the Universal Monsters. Am a big fan of those movies. What are some of your favorite monsters from Universal? By the way, Sabrina Luizides Meredith, frequent commenter. Hi, Sabrina. She also asked about what my favorite Universal monsters were. My favorite is the original Invisible Man, the Claude Rains Invisible Man. That's my favorite Universal monster, and that's my favorite of the original Universal monster movies. I think it's just brilliant all around, and I think Claude Rains' mostly vocal performance as that character is just wonderful. Second place, probably the Wolfman. Great tragic character. Third place, probably Karloff's Frankenstein. But I adore so many of those Universal monsters. Becca Hawkins, hi Steve. I recently heard that God's Not Dead 3 is coming out in 2018, presumably still during Trump's first term, assuming he is still the president by then. This makes the premise of such persecution complex films all the more ridiculous, as Trump was largely elected by the evangelicals who love the persecution fantasies of God's Not Dead and God's Not Dead 2. My question is, do you think they will cap this off as a trilogy, or will it become a saga? Oh man, they will make those movies as long as churches are willing to buy block tickets for them. As long as there's that audience that still goes to see them or rents them on VOD and makes it profitable, they will make God Is Not Dead 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It'll go on forever. It'll be like fucking Jaws, you know? It'll be like Friday the 13th. It'll just go on forever because look, Christians have never been persecuted in the United States. Not once in American history have Christians as a general group been persecuted. And yet that persecution fantasy persists and is a very common thing that conservative Christians particularly love to cling to and love to have told back to them. So yeah, they'll make those movies forever, as long as there's money to be made doing it. Existential Anarchist. Hi, Steve. What do you do when you're extremely angry about something or at someone, but there's nothing constructive to do about it? Do you punch walls or eat your fingernails? Or do you just take a walk? I find something else to do. I find distraction to be very helpful. So I'll write something or work on a video or read something or watch like a movie or a TV show. I'll do something to take my mind off of it. That's what I do. I don't act out violently. I don't usually like have to go for a walk or exercise or something like that. I find something else to do. I find something to work on or something to watch or something to read that gives me something else to think about. And that usually does the trick. Jordan Joan P. Hey Steve, I just recently finished watching all seasons of Supergirl. Do you have any theories on what would happen in the next season and what you would like to see more of? Well, I would love to see more of Tyler Hoechlin's Superman, because that's my favorite Superman since Christopher Reeve. Any excuse they have to have him guest star would be totally fine with me. I would love to see a big Justice League style crossover that includes his Superman in the crossover. So you would have Superman and Supergirl and the Flash and Green Arrow and the Legends of Tomorrow crew, and have like just a big Justice League style crossover, and have it come out in November right as the Justice League movie comes out, so we can see how it's actually, we can have a good Justice League style crossover on TV while the fucking awful one is in the movies. That's what I would like to see personally. Kevin Logan, you still not up for debating that garbage person? Yeah, nah, you know, you know what? Maybe I should. I mean, what really changed my mind on it was when he spent probably thousands of dollars to cross an ocean and show up in person to personally stalk and intimidate a woman that he has spent years stalking and intimidating and harassing for money on the internet. Up until then, I thought, no, this is a professional piece of shit. I shouldn't have anything to do with him. But after I saw that, I thought, oh no, he's worthy of a serious discussion. No, fuck him. Fuck him and fuck everybody like him. They're all fucking, you know, garbage human is too nice. Garbage human is the kindest way to describe him and people like him. He's not a garbage human. He is a walking, talking pile of shit, though not, from all available evidence, a thinking one. Vitamin W, thanks for answering my JWAD/DWAD question. If you just call him Jason, and since Jason with a J is currently an alternate universe character in Opinionville, and since you interact with him on Lemme Listen Late Seating, does that make your existence canon in the Opinionverse? I think it does. If you have watched any of the Steve and Stuffy videos, there was one passing reference to Opinionville in a Stuffy video, where Stuffy said he was concerned about his friends, I think Gary specifically, in Opinionville during the one of the crises that Opinionville was weathering a couple years ago. So yes, I believe, at least indirectly, that I would be canon in Opinionville. Samuel Sturgill, Steve, what's your opinion on corporal punishment? I was never beaten by my parents, but almost everyone I knew growing up was, all like, my dad whooped my ass when I was a kid, and whooping this and whipping that. I don't agree with it myself. No, neither do I. I was whooped, as you might say, occasionally by my mom and dad when I was a kid, and I don't look back on it as a traumatic experience. But at the same time, just because I wasn't destroyed by it doesn't mean that it's okay. I don't think it's okay. I don't think people should do it. I don't think there's ever a reason to do it, and I don't think there's an excuse for it. And I would not want to do that if I were a parent, and I don't think parents should do it. I don't think parents should hit their kids. You know, so the fact that I was hit by my parents as a form of discipline when I was a kid and turned out okay for the most part, that to me is irrelevant, because I'm not the only person in the world. A lot of people were subjected to it and are not okay with it. And that's what's important. And there's no reason for it. There's no reason for it. It's just not justifiable. So no, I'm against it completely. That's it for the questions. It's time now for the shout out. This is going to be the final shout out of the month of June. And my shout outs this month have been dedicated to LGBTQ plus positive organizations because June is Pride Month. And I have focused particularly on organizations that have stood up for and advocated for marginalized communities within the already marginalized LGBTQ plus community. And this final shout out actually goes to 3 organizations that all have one thing in common, and that is they advocate for LGBTQ plus people within Muslim communities. And I have 3 organizations that are based in countries around the world and regions around the world to help LGBTQ folks and to increase their visibility and give them support and fight for their equality and their fair, humane treatment in Muslim communities here in the US and in Europe and the Middle East. So here are the 3 organizations that get the shout out this week in the final shout out of Pride Month. First, there is the Muslim Alliance for Sexual and Gender Diversity. They are based here in the United States. Then there is Imaan, which is based in the United Kingdom. And then finally, there is the Global Queer Muslim Network, which is actually a whole series of organizations that are based throughout Europe and the Middle East. All 3 of them deserve your attention and your support and can use your support and your help in doing a really, really necessary and really wonderful good thing in the world. So there you go. Those are the shout outs. I want to also tell you, as I always do at this time, to check out the Lemme Listen family of podcasts. These are podcasts that are created and co-hosted, for the most part, by my good friend Jason Harding of Opinionville, and all of them are excellent. You should listen to all of the wonderful Lemme Listen podcasts, but specifically I want to single out Late Seating, which is the movie review podcast that Jason co-hosts with me, where we take a look at a film that has a certain reputation, either of being great or being terrible. We give it a fresh watch, we make fun of it, and then we decide for ourselves and for your listening pleasure whether we think that it deserves whatever reputation it has, whether that reputation be good or bad. You can listen to our most recent episode, which is our review of the Walt Disney Family classic Old Yeller, which is a really, really good episode, one of our best episodes, I think, really funny. And you can also prepare for our next episode, which will be about the classic mystery movie 1974's Albert Finney starring as Hercule Poirot, Murder on the Orient Express. So if you want to do your homework and get all the jokes for the next episode of Late Seating, which will go up next week, it will be about Murder on the Orient Express, the original. So go watch that and you'll get all the jokes and you'll know everything we're talking about. You can listen to the most recent episode of Late Seating and all of the past episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the awesome Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcast.com. That's it for me, everybody. I am out of here for another week. I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank you all for your questions. If you have a question for this series, please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video, but in order for that to happen, you have to ask. So please do leave your question in the comment section below this video. Thank you all once again for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.